Hi everyone, welcome to my video on the 4 main types of medieval military bodkin and how to make them. And the first one we're going to be looking at is the needle bodkin, the London Museum Type 7. Really basic, classic medieval military bodkin designed for use against mail. Not plate, because the delicate tip will curl up on you, but it's fantastic against mail. It will find the holes and open those rings up very efficiently. So my forge was built in the 1820s and it's powered by these lovely old bellows from the same time period, and I make everything using coal and charcoal as I find that gives me the best economics, and it's really lovely to work in. Nice clean burning, not much clinker if any. And what we're going to do is get the first bar up to temperature, and I'm using a bar of 8x8 mild. The original ones were made in wrought, and once that's up to a good forging temperature, a good white heat, we're ready to forge on the diamond section, and we want to flatten the end out into our socket. There are a whole bunch of ways of doing this. This is the way I like to do it. It's the way I was shown. And there are two main fundamental goals here when you're forging out your socket. The first one is to get the shoulders near the near edge of the anvil as wide as you can get them, to give you as much material as you can to roll up without leaving an unsightly gap. And the second is to focus on the end of the socket and get the corners as clean as you can. That means that when it's rolled up, you don't have to grind away excess to get a nice clean opening. So the next job is to roll up that socket, and to do that we want like a red-orange heat, nothing too hot, otherwise things start to move in places you don't want them to move. So we're using the crosspeen of the hammer and that little step on the anvil to start the bend, and then everything else is done on the flat with the tongs constantly rotating. That's really important. That stops any one area being worked too much. It keeps everything in line, everything central, and it saves you having to correct mistakes again later on by removing bends. So here's that from a different view. So crossbeam of the hammer into that corner to initialize that bend. Fold the first end down and then just rotate everything as you go. You want the two ends to come underneath each other. You want everything in line, everything straight, everything even, and it will make everything quicker in the long run. Now we need to set our neck transition. This is the one step that a lot of people miss out because they're not looking at original medieval heads. They roll the socket and then they forge the point. This is a really important step. It makes the head look much nicer. You get that lovely blending transition, but also it makes the head stronger, as there are no holes, there are no weak spots, there are no sections where the metal is thinner than anything else. Everything's tightened up, everything's closed up, and that one potential weak spot has been removed. A mistake that a lot of people tend to make when they're doing this is they focus too much on the opening of the socket at the very end. If you focus on that too much, you'll find that it closes right up on you, and you have to take a lot of time to open it up again. Sometimes you can't open it up, and all your work at this point has been wasted. So completely ignore the opening, just focus on the neck transition, get everything blended, everything smooth and round. And again, from a different angle here, you can see that I'm rotating everything as I go, and the anvil is doing all the work. The hammer's not really doing anything, it's just bringing the curve of the anvil up to form that transition. The next job now, if you need to, is to open up the socket. I've got two little marks here on my mandrel, one at 9mm and one at 10mm. So I always know exactly how wide that's going to be. Little tap on the end to get it exactly the right diameter, and then while it's still warm, just bending it with the tongs until everything's lined up and in line. Very little hammering on the socket itself while it's in the mandrel. And that's our socket good to go. The next job is to cut off the socket from the parent bar so that we can form the point. So cut off hardy goes into the hardy hole, Want a nice good working temperature here, a yellow or a white heat to make things quick. And we're going to work over the cut-off hardy, clean strikes with the hammer, nice and firm, rotate 90 degrees all the way around, and it shouldn't take you more than one heat to get this head broken off. Don't go all the way through, you don't want to be hitting your hardened and tempered edge with your hammer. That's not good at all. Break off the arrowhead with your arrowhead tongs and you're ready to form the point. So again, here we want a really good working temperature, just under welding heat. That way you avoid any delamination from working it into a very fine point, especially if you're working in wrought. Very important. There are loads of different ways to form a point. Drawing out is a fundamental blacksmithing technique. You can draw it towards you, you can draw it away from you, you can use the pick of the anvil. I'll use quite a few different methods in this video. And this first time I'm just forging it away from me in a traditional way on the far edge of the anvil. Now your goal really with this point is to make everything clean, everything sharp, and to work all the way into a planishing heat so that you remove all of your hammer marks. What you don't want to do is have to take your arrowhead to the grinder and waste time, waste grinding belts and material and expense to get the arrowhead into a finished shape. You want that to be done on the anvil with the hammer, and any grinding and polishing is just for aesthetics really. So you can see I'm just straightening everything up, making sure everything looks in line. Always rotating, everything has to be central. Sight down it, sometimes that can help quite a bit. And once you're happy, that's that needle bodkin all finished, ready to polish. And that's our first arrowhead complete. So here you can see the socket doesn't need any grinding. It's round, it's smooth, it's finished, it's been plashed. The neck transition is nice and tidy. And then when it's ground like this, all you do is strike the faces with a high grit and you wire wheel everything. And there's your finished needle bodkin, ready to fit to your arrow. The next head we're going to look at is the Type 8. These are from Castle Acre, and the Type 8, often confused with a Type 10, but I'll explain the differences in a minute. Type 8 is a very, very basic, very short bodkin, and it's the development of the Type 7. As the armour got better and the Type 7 needle bodkin started to curl over, it got shorter and shorter and developed into the Type 8, and that then worked its way into the Type 9. Okay, so Type 8 bodkin, made in exactly the same way as Type 7. You want to work the shoulders of the socket and the outside of the socket in exactly the same way. You've got to have enough material to roll up. If the socket itself is triangular before you roll it up, you'll find that your net is very tight if you can get it wrapped up at all. So nice wide shoulders, nice wide opening with clear corners, and that will make everything much easier and tidier when you come to finish the head off. So again, trying to get this done in one heat. You want to minimise the amount of heating up you do of very thin pieces. Didn't quite manage it on this one, clearly. This time we're just taking the corners as far as they can go. Trying to get them as sharp and as tidy as possible to avoid grinding. We can roll this up just like the Type 7. Cross clean of the hammer into that step and then work everything else on the flat of the anvil. Always rotating, always keeping everything central. It will just make your life easier. Don't focus on one area, just keep everything moving. Trust yourself that things will come into line and everything else can be worked on and tidied up as you go, as an overall piece rather than focusing on one small area. So here we're forging the neck. You want to keep this nice and smooth, blend everything in together from the parent bar all the way down to the socket, and again work all the way into a planishing heat. That will remove your hammer marks and make everything nice and tidy. And you can see on this one that the end of the socket is tightening up quite a lot, but it doesn't quite go far enough to be a problem. That can be tapped out on the mandrel again to exactly the diameter that you want. If it gets much tighter than that, you will have a bit of a problem. So we're going to cut that point off now. Now you need way less material than you did with the needle bodkin. It's a much shorter point. But again, a couple of strikes per face, rotating 90 degrees, and that head should break off quite nicely. And never go all the way through. Break that off with the arrowhead tongs, and you're good to form the point of the Type 8 bodkin. So I'm going to use a different process here to form the point. Rather than drawing it away from me on the far edge of the anvil, I'm going to use the bick of the anvil, use that natural curve, forging flat down with the hammer, and that will form your point. And with this one, because it's such a short point, as soon as you have those four faces well defined and you've got a point, you're pretty much done. And then you can just make sure everything's in line by rotating and sighting down and just checking, take any bends out. There we go, that one's pretty much done there. So there's your finished, neatly forged Type 8 bodkin. It's going to need almost no grinding whatsoever to turn that into a functional finished head that matches the museum examples. And you can see by working into a planishing heat that the faces of the head are nice and sharp, well defined. And here it is all ground up, wire wheeled on the socket itself, and the faces have just been given a quick strike with a high grip belt. So there's our Type 8 bodkin. And now we're moving on to the big military attempt at cutting through plate armour of the 15th century, the Type 9 or heavy war bodkin. Strong diamond section rather than square like the Type 8 and the Type 7. And this time I'm going to let this video run all the way through without any edits, so you can see how long they take without rushing. And I'll let you just enjoy. The processes are all the same, apart from the very end where you just want to curve the point rather than form four straight faces. And there we are, our finished Type 9 late medieval military bodkin. Very similar to the other heads that we've made, but just a slightly more curved profile, much more like a cold chisel designed to cut through the plate of the time. And now we've got one more head to do, the Type 10. The Type 10 is probably the most confusing head to a lot of people. Some people think it's the Type 8, some people think it's its own type. The Type 10 is the shortened version of a Type 7 with straight shoulders and a straight, longer point than the Type 8. But most importantly, it has a diamond section. So what we're going to do here is take the Type 8 that we made earlier, and we're going to simply heat up the end, and we're going to forge that square sectioned Type 8 into a diamond section, which turns it into a Type 10. So using the same method as the Type 9, forging it over the bick of the anvil, and the moment that these heads are in line and everything's nice and clean and crisp, that will become a Type 10 arrowhead. There are different forms of it. There are wider ones, there are shorter ones, but that's the London Museum way of defining this head, from the Type 7, which is much longer, and from the Type 9, which has the curved convex edges. So there's your Type 10 military bodkin. Now I think that's a much nicer looking head than the Type 8. It's got a lovely diamond section. It's almost leaf shaped, but it's very clearly a military head designed for use against light armour and mail. And there it is, all forged up, ground up, ready to go. So again, a wire wheel on the socket and then a high grit finish on the head itself. And we've made all four of the standard medieval military bodkins. There are variations of everything. They kind of never stopped developing and changing, and obviously different blacksmiths would make them in a different way. But those are our basic London Museum Type 7, 8, 9 and 10 military heads.